Hi everybody, welcome to our Aspect Festival Inter-Community session. This is the only festival on outside of the announcement the other day, and there's no muddy boots or anything. However, I would like to introduce our headliners for today. But before I do, for all those YouTubers out there, if you want to join in, please click on join if you wish to participate. So I'd just like to introduce our panel today, who are going to talk about what is unique about social science ventures and how to support them. So first we have Rachel Middlemass, who's head of R&D partnerships in Zinc, which is an accelerator and venture builder. We have Chris Fellingham from Oxford University Innovation and also the director of the ARC and Success Accelerator program. And we have Kajal Sanghrajka from LSE Generate, who is also director of the ASAP Student Accelerator program. So just before we start, I'd like to get everybody to tell us a bit more about themselves, their roles at their respective organisations, and what areas of aspect they've covered in a bit more detail. So, Rachel, would you mind opening as regards Zinc, please?
No, not at all. Thank you, Tony, and hello to everybody today. So as Tony said, I'm Rachel Middlemass. I'm now the Head of Research and Development Partnerships with Zinc, and I'll tell you a bit more about what Zinc is, since they may well be a mystery to lots of people on the call today in a bit. So yeah, now Head of Research and Development Partnerships. Before that, I had the very great pleasure of working for several years at the LSE with Kajal and her colleagues, among others, and before that at UCL. At Zinc, my role particularly covers partnerships between researchers and very early stage entrepreneurs. The bit of Zinc that I'll be talking about today is our Venture Builder program. Again, I'll explain what that is in a little bit, and the ways that researchers and particularly social scientists are able to use that to achieve impacts through commercial markets.
Okay, thanks, Rachel. That's great. And Chris, would you like to introduce yourself and your role and what areas of aspect you've been working on, please?
Yes, thanks, Tony, and delighted to be here as well. I guess I have three hats. So my first hat is that I'm the Social Science, Humanities and Social Ventures lead at Oxford University Innovation. So that's basically helping researchers in social science and humanities at Oxford create ventures, spin out ventures in particular, and we've done about 6 in the last 3 years, which is not bad. My second hat is I run the research commercialization community of practice at Aspect alongside Tony, and that's where we basically get all the technology transfer officers for the different universities working together to understand how better to support social science ventures. And then my third hat, as Tony alludes to, is I co-founded alongside actually with Tony and Sam Gallagher, the ARC Accelerator, which is the first accelerator for social science researchers to create ventures based directly off their research. Yeah, which has been a pleasure and is in its 2nd year.
Okay, that's great. Thanks very much, Chris. And finally, Kajal, could you tell us a bit more about your work at LSE Generate and the ASAP program?
Yes, thanks, Tony, and very happy to be here as well alongside the other panelists. So as Tony mentioned, I'm the co-director of the Aspect Student Accelerator program alongside LJ Silverman at LSE, and the second hat is also that I sit on the board of LSE Generate, which is the LSE's entrepreneurial arm. By background, always been passionate about developing entrepreneurial skills at university. I'm a social scientist and started in New York, Columbia University's first incubator program. And prior to ASAP, designed and launched the London School of Economics' first ever accelerator. ASAP was the first flagship 4-month social sciences student alumni accelerator with 8 participating universities, and we helped to support 19 social ventures. So keen to share many of the insights and wisdoms around that 4-month program today.
Okay, great, thanks. So everybody knows they're in good hands with lots of experience in the pipeline. So I was going to start I'm just going to flip the session actually. So obviously, Kajal, you're at the sort of student acceleration end. Chris, you're staff and more postdoctoral. Rachel, I guess you're at the final end in terms of the outputs that are then scaled and grown by Zinc. So could I start with you, Rachel, in terms of 2 points? One is what results and outcomes you've had through Zinc working with social science researchers. And secondly, what do you think is unique about social science itself and the specific things we need to address that may not occur with STEM or other science-based applications?
Sure, I will have a go. So as I said, it might be helpful just to say a few words at the start about what Zinc is and does, since they may not be familiar to everyone who's on the call today. So Zinc looks to tackle big societal challenges through mission-driven entrepreneurial programs that build brand new companies from scratch. The way we do that is mostly through a venture builder program, which brings together 50 to 70 individuals from different backgrounds, but with a shared common interest in the program mission. So Zinc itself has 4 overarching missions, which are around mental health, the future of work, healthy aging, and the environment. And each of our venture builders kind of zooms in on a specific aspect of one of those missions. So the next one, for example, will focus on the mental and emotional health of children and young people specifically. Founders who join our program do so on a full-time basis for a year. So they need to be prepared to quit their jobs and throw everything they have and making a go of a totally new business. Just to add to the kind of excitement of all of that, the people who come into our program come in with no existing team, no existing business. They don't really even have a clear idea of the solution that they want to develop. But what they do have is a passion for making a difference in the mission area and a desire to know everything that they can possibly get to know about the most difficult and unmet challenges within that area. Over the course of the Zinc Venture Builder, they hopefully meet similarly motivated co-founders, set up a company, and start to develop new products and services that respond to their chosen problem. And we also provide support, of course, to the portfolio of companies who've grown out of our previous venture builders. The things we've achieved so far, so results so far, we were set up in 2017. Since then, we've run 3 venture builder programs supporting about 150 entrepreneurs, those being selected from more than 2,000 applicants. Those 3 programs have produced 45 companies, 31 of which are still active today. The kind of motivation and the logic behind the Zinc approach is threefold. So it's about addressing fragmentation in the UK research and innovation landscape, tons of brilliant research and researchers, lots of passionate, committed innovators, but not always or everywhere a kind of good connection between those things. The second, as an extension of that, is around unlocking and making the most of the frustrated talent on both sides of that R&I piece. And the third is about using that better connectivity and unlocked talent to tackle some of the biggest challenges facing the developed world. And we do focus on the developed world rather than more widely. Social scientists have been at the heart of all of that from the outset, in part just because there are quite a lot of them at Zinc, but mostly because we think that social science insights are absolutely essential to really understanding those big social challenges and to developing solutions that reflect and respond to the needs of the people affected by them. How the way we involve social scientists, so how social scientists actually participate in this, varies. Some of the 30 or so companies in our portfolio have been founded by social scientists. So one of the founders of Furley, for example, which aims to help women have healthier and more pleasurable sex, did a social sciences PhD before she moved into the startup world. Lots of them employ social scientists to do all sorts of things. So they run survey and interview designs, or they do literature reviews, or they run co-creation sessions with users, or they design data collection practices, or they analyze data, they evaluate products, a whole range of different things. But aside from kind of nicking researchers from academia, one of the other key ways that we work with social scientists is inviting them to join us as one of 100 or so visiting fellows who support each Venture Builder program. So those are experts in a relevant field. They're interested in the potential to deliver impacts at scale through commercial products, but unlike our founders, they don't want to leave their jobs and start their own businesses, or at least not yet. So their input normally looks like kind of talks and office hours for founders, but quite a lot of them will choose to be more involved, maybe join advisory boards, and they often stay on those long after the program itself has ended. More established ventures are also increasingly interested in co-bidding for funding with researchers, and that has included quite a lot of social scientists to run innovative primary research projects with them. Aspect, in fact, very generously funded a collaboration last year between the universities of Glasgow and Aberdeen and Tandem, which is the Zinc venture looking to improve transport infrastructure for blue-collar workers living outside of major cities in the UK. What have we learned about social scientists and how to support them? How do we think they're unique and so on? I think possibly we've concluded so far that social sciences and certainly social science researchers aren't actually necessarily unique. Obviously they are unlike the kind of subset of STEM researchers who are working on something that really obviously underpins a new drug or a bit of engineering software or something that can be patented and immediately sold for vast sacks of gold, but that is quite a small subset. And of course, there are lots of researchers and in fact, lots of experts across different sectors for whom those are not realistic routes to commercial impact anyway. So in common with that much larger majority, I think social scientists perhaps struggle to see sometimes quite how useful they are or how their skills and expertise and indeed their interests and their preferences can actually fit into a commercial model. So what Zinc does to support them with that is pretty much the same as we would do for other experts, which is to bring them together with different sorts of people with different backgrounds and to encourage them to find and work with people whose skills and experiences are complementary to their own. So they don't need to know everything there is to know about how to build a particular bit of hardware or how to achieve product market fit or how to demonstrate traction to investors or whatever it may be. They just need to be able to meet and work with the people who do know those things, and in return to be able to bring what Liam Neeson would describe as their very particular set of skills to the commercialization party. Like most people, I think social scientists don't often have a kind of single brilliant idea that's perfectly ready to be commercialized, just tucked up their sleeves. So the approach that we take is therefore much more about supporting the iterative application of social science skills and methods in combination, as I said, with the skills and methods of other sorts of people. But as well as bringing people together, our Venture Builder does include access to executive coaching, a whole load of program content on different aspects of innovation and enterprise, and additional support from the in-house R&D team, of which I am just one member. We're also really big on working in the open. So we encourage all of our founders actually to tell everyone they can about their ideas and to get as much feedback as they possibly can on that at the earliest possible stage, rather than protecting something that might turn out in any case to be useless without having that external input. And the final point I'll make is that I think organising all of that around a sort of social impact mission is something that really helps open up our particular route to commercial markets to social scientists who, and I know this well from having previously worked with them for a long time, are often unexcited at best about commercial activity in perhaps more traditional packages. I'll leave it at that for now, I think. Thank you, Tony.
No, that's fantastic. I mean, that's really good. There's a couple of things you mentioned there, I think, that are relevant to all this. That's about socializing the mission and the fragmentation effect that we do tend to have in some of our areas, which we all are trying to address in this sort of chain. And just with the festival theme, I think we just need to make sure social scientists are on the pyramid stage and not behind the burger vans at the back. So this is about bigging them up in this festival. So Chris, would you tell us about your views on results and outcomes through your activity and what you've identified as is a unique to social science and what support is required? Thanks.
Yes, certainly. So I guess exactly like Rachel, I completely agree that there's this huge reservoir of basically untapped expertise, but as much research with an awful lot of potential impact in it that basically hasn't really had enough mechanisms to get out there. If you think about how most social scientists took the impact part of their research, it was traditionally through public communication or through trying to basically change policy at a local or national government level. And those are both fine as mechanisms and they might always be the workhorses, but they're not the only route. And I think it's left an incredible amount that could change society and the economy for the better. I think ventures, and I'm biased, are a particularly powerful way to basically take that impact and then deliver it both at scale and at an enduring level, rather than the one-off kind of project level that you might get at research funding. And I think when I started at Oxford University Innovation about 3.5 years ago, there were basically no social science ventures. Maybe there was 1 or 2 from Manchester, maybe 1 from Oxford 10 years ago kind of thing. But basically there was nothing in the entire landscape. And that wasn't just in the UK, that's globally. Canada, US, Australia, continental Europe, no one's really started doing this until basically the last 2.5 years. So it's completely new, which in some senses is great. Because it's an exciting field, but it's tough because it means that the whole ecosystem, research councils, funders, investors, mentors don't really know what a social science venture is because there's so few to see. And that's been a challenge, I think, for everyone working in the field. The good news is that in the last 2 years, that has completely changed. Through ARC alone, we've had basically 30 ventures in the last 2 years. And I think if you took the aggregate of the universities involved, we're probably looking at something like 50 to 55 either spun out or hopefully quite close to spinning out ventures across UK higher education. So I think that's incredibly promising. If I think about where they're kind of targeting, I think there's some quite obvious trends, and those are particularly in the applied research areas. So international development, education, health and social care, and climate change in the environment are the ones that we're seeing a lot of social scientists target their kind of venture ideas at. If I might be a little provocative, I would say I slightly disagree with Rachel on a couple of points. I do think social science researchers are different. I think they are unique, definitely compared with their STEM colleagues. And I also think some of them do have single brilliant ideas, but I think that probably reflects the fact we run 2 slightly different programs because we're not a venture builder. By definition, when they come to us, they've got their idea and that's our job to help them commercialize it. Whereas I think Zinc takes a quite different mission-driven approach, which creates a different type of venture. And it's frankly good that we have both in the ecosystem because there's a lot of diversity in what social scientists want to do. I think if I had to say one big difference, I think between social science ventures and the others, it tends to be that the interventions are quite deep. And what do I mean by that? Well, I think if you take, for example, like the tech for good space, you get some really amazing ideas. There is sometimes a bias towards these kind of super scalable apps, which feel good to the investor because they get big numbers. But the question would be, do they really deliver like meaningful interventions if they're targeting something like mental health or health problem or social care? Social scientists kind of come at it from the other angle because maybe they've been working on a particular research area for 10 or 20 years. They often have a really good understanding as to what works, what doesn't, the context and the nuance. Now, that doesn't mean it's going to be a good venture. But what it does mean, hopefully, is that we can be quite confident that the intervention is the right one to try. And so I think that's quite a big difference. In terms of commercialization, what that usually means, though, is that we don't usually have a good product at the start. Usually they tend to start out iteratively. Maybe they do some consulting work where they've worked with organizations to try and get them to work on their intervention. And over time, they think we've got something that we could turn into a sort of service product. And then maybe a bit further down the line, maybe a software product. So it's a longer pathway to commercialization, which is definitely not the case for the STEM colleagues who usually have a widget or a molecule or a drug to flog. So yeah, I think those would be my thoughts.
Okay, thanks. Controversy already, so that may be interesting later when we ask each other some pressing questions. So Kajal, in respect of your area, probably one that there's a real opportunity to be unleashed is in the student area. So would you like to just give us an insight into your results and outcomes achieved and what you think is unique about the particular cohort you've dealt with?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Tony. I won't add to the controversy quite yet, maybe later. I think similar to Rachel's comment earlier, when we started out this journey about 18 months ago, we really looked at the landscape of accelerators. Many are tech focused, many prescribe to this Silicon Valley narrative of one model of entrepreneurship. And what we wanted to do is bring in entrepreneurial leaders to really embrace their strengths as social science researchers, and from this depth of really robust evidence, really big social problems that they wanted to solve, and have a curriculum that was adapted for that and for those different strengths. So as I mentioned earlier, we had 19 companies from across 8 participating universities at Aspect, All of them were early stage, so they were less than 2 years old, and the criteria were that they were tackling at least 2 UN SDG goals, and they were rooted in social science. So they came in with a very different mindset, I think, to traditional accelerators. They were industry agnostic, and so they were tackling everything from mental health for university students to supporting sustainable farming in India. So it really was across the globe and across the breadth of social problems. In terms of results, a few highlights and a little bit more about the programme. The first cohort, we've had one cohort only so far, with a hope to continue that, but 45% female founders, 45% BAME, 25% were first generation university students. They were all student or alumni of the 8 universities, and the programme had a core curriculum of 16 boot camps, which were specifically adapted for social ventures. So teaching everything from customer discovery to impact measurement and leveraging things like the social business model canvas. So that's different to your traditional STEM accelerator. We also had fireside chats from social entrepreneurs who were 5 or 7 years down the line, who were giving us really grassroots insights into how they did it. I think one of the things we found was different to traditional accelerators. There's playbooks and a lot of literature out there about how to create standard business models, but for social science rooted ventures or social ventures, that there's less literature out there. So we really needed to learn from the outside community and people who'd trialed and errored their way through this. So we also had a 2-month mentorship program. And just a few highlights from the actual startup. So there's a company called I Speak Mental Health, which distributed 85 mental health kits to UK universities. Impagro Solutions, which supported sustainable farming, supported 10 farming communities across India. And nearly 200 teenagers were trained in sex education and contraception in Colombia. So it just gives you an insight to the varied things we had. And I guess if I were to add what's really unique, there were commonalities with the general population of student entrepreneurs, but the differences were we had entrepreneurs who were really leading with that social purpose. So when they pitched, when they shared their stories of their businesses, time and again, the audience would say how inspirational they were and the depth of knowledge in that specific social area they were trying to solve. And they're solving, wicked problems that are complex and messy. And so, that alone is fairly inspiring. I'd say the other thing is credibility from robust social science research. I mean, when you see pitches normally, you don't have that depth of evidence and knowledge. And so I think they can really stand out and embrace that level of research that they have in the background. And the third thing I say is they're creating very unique social business models from the ground up. So they're using things like the social business model canvas, and we use this term called, instead of product market fit, purpose product market fit. So they're infusing that social purpose and social science throughout their business processes from the get-go.
So I'm just getting my Q&A buttons and mute buttons confused. Yeah, so that's actually brought together a lot of the commonality, I think, in terms of everybody's, even though we're all at different parts of the pipeline, this is all about robust systems, making it fit for purpose, validating the actual issue, and then finding the unique solution to that, which is often complex with some of the more stylized methodologies which have developed out of Silicon Valley and software, etc., like you say. So there's obviously a counter to that in that we don't make it so unique and so walled that it becomes independent and meaningless. So what I'd like to do is ask each of you, if you were passing on one of your projects down the pipeline, what would you actually say to the person who's given you that project before to sort out? So Rachel, if you want to perhaps respond to that. So if you were receiving a social science-based project from Chris, what would you like to see that currently isn't addressed?
Yeah, so again, I'm like apologize in advance that I'm probably going to take issue with the kind of basis of the question in a moment, but it is probably worth just noting again that we really don't think ours is the only way to use social science research in commercial contexts or to deliver social science-based impacts at scale on the problems that we're trying to address, and just agreeing really profoundly with Chris that it's good to have a range of different pathways to commercial impacts for social scientists to take. So we're doing a particular type of thing for people at a particular stage. And again, as Chris alluded to, what we're doing is something that we think works for our particular audience, and that is people who want to give up their jobs, commit full time to a venture builder program, start a company from scratch, and then stick with that long haul. And clearly that is not everybody, it's not for everybody. And Chris and Kajal are working with really different sorts of audiences. So I think that issue of audience is actually sort of more pertinent here than stage in pipeline, that they're just working with social scientists who are at a different stage and interested in exploring commercialization in a slightly different way at that point in their careers or at that point in their lives. So in fact, lots of the projects that they work on are probably quite a bit further advanced than some of the things that some of our very early stage companies are doing. So the pipeline that we're talking about here is probably not quite as sort of neatly linear as it might look as if it is at first glance. And yeah, you know, I know everyone at Zinc would say that both ARC and ASAP are sort of brilliant, really important initiatives for those different audience segments. I don't want to completely duck the question though. So I guess I would say that it would be helpful for both Chris and Kajal to continue doing whatever they can to improve academic incentives to and confidence in working with and for industry partners. That's a bigger job than either of them can manage, with all due respect to both of them, but yeah, just keep chipping away at all of that, particularly that kind of confidence building piece for social scientists, and doing whatever they can to facilitate this sort of more fluid movement between academia and industry that we all quite badly need. And I would say that perhaps really is particularly badly needed for social scientists, so maybe this is a point of sort of uniqueness for them, because they've been traditionally, as Chris described, so sort of distanced from all things industry and commercial, but they have so much to add to those things.
Okay, thank you. So Chris, taking the same analogy and not necessarily thinking linearly pipeline, I don't want to get too into that, but could you think about, if you were talking to Kajal, what you would like to see from some of the more student-centric areas, postgraduates or postdoctoral, or what you would like to see as a more finished or improved handover?
Well, I mean, I think the students definitely have some advantage over ARC. I mean, you know, it's certainly true that students probably are a bit more fearless, I think, in general, and they certainly have a lot more energy. I certainly did when I was a student. And I think also, and particularly hearing from LJ and Kajal, is that they're very good at hustling, which frankly is one of the most important qualities in an entrepreneur. And I don't think it comes as naturally to academics, which is tough, because it means if you're not hustling to get something for free, like maybe a bit of software development, maybe a bit of money on the side, maybe a website, you're going to have to get funding for that. And then you're limited to all the funding options. So I think hustling really expands the number of possibilities available as you kind of try and build your venture. And it's something I think the students can really teach actually a lot of the academics. I think they've really got that, and I'm really impressed with that. I think I'd also just like to kind of build a little bit on Rachel's point though, which is I think, and it feeds into Kajal's bit, the more engagement that social scientists have with industry, the more likely I think they are to be successful. I mean industry in the broadest term. I actually mean anything outside of academia, where they both have to communicate their research and their ideas, but also they learn what the context is that those research or ideas might be useful. Because actually most of the ventures that we get have had some external contact, either during the research phase or a little bit later when somebody's come in. And it basically provides a lot of the key validation that actually outside of, you know, the journal that the article for research was published in, there is value in this. If somebody else is willing to co-create the research, either time, data, resources, whatever, that means they find value in it as well. And there's value beyond academia. And that's probably the most important single indicator. And I don't think it's a coincidence that it's areas like education, like international development, where they do work a lot with the education establishment or, you know, NGOs, that they know, like, actually we've got something here which could be beyond research and could be a venture or a license. So I don't know if that quite answered your question, but I feel like I muddled through it.
No, that's fine. I mean, obviously, we've just wanted to contextualize just for that. So, Kajal, I'm afraid there's nobody before you to hand anything to. So perhaps you could think how the learning you've had, how would you improve the next cohort or the next Accelerator program that you would do based on what you learned with the first one?
So I'm gonna jump on things that Chris and Rachel said, but you know, the first thing in my mind is it's such a unique selling point to have a university-based accelerator. We have 8 amazing institutions backing us. That's very different to a Y Combinator or Textile, some of the really popular ones. So we really have to kind of leverage all of those resources as our competitive advantage almost to support the social science entrepreneurs. And so as that you were both talking, I was thinking, create a super accelerator which integrates the students, the academics, the later stage ventures, because that's really what you need. You need that ecosystem, and then obviously plugging into the wider community. We learned so much from social entrepreneurs who are later stage, but also from academics who are experts and advisors on boards. So it really takes people coming out of their bubbles and working together, which is something Aspect has done, but you just can't underestimate all of those pieces of the ecosystem working together to create sustainable and scalable ventures to solve the problems that we're all trying to solve. Okay,
thanks. So just turning to some of the questions that are coming through on the chat now. I need all your collective minds on this. I'm just going to read this one out because it's quite a 2-part question. So this is, are the panelists aware of or currently applying concepts and methods from the field of complex adaptive human systems? This is fundamental to the challenges and work of social ventures in assessing ecosystems at feasibility and organising the social impact and more.
I'll just jump in and be very honest and say Bruce was on our previous panel and I had no clue what that was initially. I think you know, we did our best to have our ventures understand those complexities and to break them down in a codified way, using both social science, social business model theory and traditional business model theory. But
okay, Chris, would you like to?
So I had to Google the term just now, and I've got the Wikipedia page up. I think short answer is no. I think longer answer would be sort of somewhat epistemological. If the field of study incorporates complexity and complex adaptive systems in it, then maybe the academic has built that in. But I think honestly, probably not.
Okay, Rachel.
Yeah, again, definitely no, we certainly don't use that term. Maybe we're doing bits of that somehow, but it's not something that I'm particularly familiar with. I would say that partly because our ventures do really, really different things. They produce really different products and services in relation to totally different missions. We kind of ask them to assess their impact, and we ourselves assess their social impact on their own terms. So we use a whole range of different kind of approaches to doing that. And we do connect them with relevant researchers where possible to help them work through that process. But great to have that flag to look at complex adaptive human systems. It sounds fascinating.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, I have a particular question that has been for you, actually, Rachel. And it says, I'd love to hear about Rachel, about the ventures that didn't continue and what learning Zinc had gained from those that would be useful to share with everybody?
Yeah, good question. So obviously we do lose a lot of people and we lose a lot of companies. Failure is completely integral to startups, as lots of people here will be aware, I'm sure. We lose them for different reasons and at different points, and that might be partly an interesting answer to your question. So some of them we lose because their mission focus shifts too much for us to be able to invest in them. So they might be doing something that's really brilliant by the end of the Venture Builder program or by the time that we kind of part ways from them, but it's no longer sufficiently within our specific mission area for us to be able to take them forwards. Others come up with a solution quite early on. Maybe it is within the mission area, but they become so attached to that single solution that it can be hard for them to find a co-founder unless they find somebody who is absolutely equally committed to the very same, very specific thing. It does make it difficult for them to match up with people. In both those cases, they are quite likely to go on and continue developing their solutions elsewhere, entirely with our blessing. That's all good. In terms of things that we can learn that might be useful to other people, I think I'd really just come back to that need for kind of combined complementary skills. So social scientists are undoubtedly incredible domain experts. And when you hear them talking about their research, there is no doubt that they are the person to bring their knowledge to that particular area. Some of them do have kind of commercial marketing skills, the sorts of skills, technical skills that you might need to build a product, but lots of them don't. So they need to find people who do. But the same is absolutely true in reverse. You can be as technically brilliant as you like, but if you don't have that kind of social science type insight into the problem and the viable, desirable solution, then you're not going to get anywhere.
Thanks. Chris, just building on that, I think this failing forward fast and not being wedded to your is a theme that I'm sure we would all resonate. So how do you think we need to address that? How do we decouple the experience with what's required at the end to deliver the change that we want to make?
Yeah, I was thinking that's quite a good question, because I was also thinking, you know, how would I answer the same question? I think, I think one thing is it's actually harder for social science research ventures per se to stop or fail, because they can often run it on the side as a kind of consultancy gig. So it doesn't really have a cost base, which can kind of fall over. But I think the other reason they fail, though, I think, is because they target quite hard sectors like local government or national government. National government, usually there's only one buyer, and local governments in the UK are completely broke. So even though they might be providing a brilliant intervention that's absolutely needed, they're broke. Often some of them are bankrupt. So that's just really, really, really hard, even if everything about the venture is perfect. But on the kind of skill set and pivoting, I think that's a hard one, especially for us in ARC, because by definition, we're trying to commercialize the research itself. That's our founding purpose. So I think there's only so much we can stray from what that original research is before it becomes something quite different. But usually, I think the key would be to have enough flexibility in who they could seek money from, that they can then develop the proposition and kind of get the business up and running, even if they can't get their ideal first customer. So for example, if they're targeting government first and they can't find government as a buyer, maybe they can get a business to buy the same kind of product while they develop it and then wheel back to government later.
Okay, thanks. So Kajal, you have these unfettered, people ready to release, maybe have no constraints or as few constraints as Chris mentioned before. How do you learn from the failures there? And, what have you done in the ASAP program in that area to help people keep focused and keep on mission?
So I don't think I've ever described them as unfettered, but that's quite a good word, so I might steal that. It's one of the focus areas really was around customer discovery. So you realize building a venture, especially when you've got reams of research in the background, that it's not a linear process. You have to keep listening to the customers. And often, with social ventures, the types of stakeholders you can reach are broader than just traditional for-profit ventures. So we really encourage them not to be too narrow in their focus on the types of customers they're trying to reach. So for example, if it's if it's a company that's trying to reduce teenage pregnancy, you don't go to a single school to try and do that. You work with a local government who can try and affect that change. So the discipline of taking your social science research, really listening to the customers and the stakeholders to rigorous customer discovery, and weaving all of those things together was the real skill. So it's sort of building this translation engine where you can then take that in real time and data-driven insights and translate that into effective business processes and business models. And that's a real skill, and it's one we observed social science founders actually fit quite well into, and were able to do that more naturally than they originally anticipated.
So I've got, I just wanted to put this in because it's good to see that there's a dialogue going in on the chat as well. So somebody's responded that they developed a business on complex adaptive systems from their PhD and have also applied this to sales to universities and government. So if anybody wants to have a look up, that's on the link in the Q&A. So just moving on, we've just got another one pop up. Okay, so just to bring this one round, it's about connecting capabilities. Obviously, Aspect is funded to connect capabilities. So the emphasis is not always on the academic or the student or the venture builder. It's sometimes on us as the practitioner. So how do you think we as practitioners need to help improve the lot of social scientists to achieve their goals? Don't all rush for the mute button, unmute button. Chris?
Yeah. I think probably the number one thing we need to do is communicate that it's a possibility. I think if I think about Oxford 3 years ago, there was nothing for social scientists or humanities researchers in the venture building space. So the idea that this was something you could do just literally wasn't on the table. Whereas if I went to medical sciences at Oxford, they do so many that even if a researcher had no intention, they knew that it was a possibility for a medical science researcher and they knew what that pathway might be. That's important for a number of reasons, not just the possibility, but actually the idea that you can become an entrepreneur, that it's okay to create a venture and you're not selling out, like a lot of the kind of more softer aspects that I think social scientists sometimes are concerned about. Those are baked in when you've got a culture within your department or your division that entrepreneurialism is normal and an accepted part of your work. So I think making it clear that they're valued and it's possible, giving them examples of peers that have gone down that route. But most importantly, I think this will speak to everyone here, is also having social ventures as an option, because a lot of the social scientists don't want to make profit from their research, but a venture might still be the best model forward for them. So the institution has to support social ventures specifically. And when you have that on the table, at Oxford, we found about 50% of the social scientists that go on to become entrepreneurs create social ventures. I think it's been the same at ARC level, so that's across institutions. So it's a critical tool that basically fits the aspiration with the right vehicle.
Thanks, Chris. And Rachel, I mean, perhaps, obviously at Zinc, you're addressing large issues, you're addressing huge issues across society. So it may not be that everybody has that level of ability to translate their outcomes, science, hypothesis, whatever. So what do you think are the differences in the problems you tackle in that context? You know, what can we learn from that?
I think we can involve social scientists in those big problems. We do try and break them down into specific opportunity areas, and those are quite specific. And within those, there is certainly quite a lot of scope for people to bring their expertise to bear. So I would agree with Chris that providing examples and inspiration is really important, and that we can keep involving them in as unscary ways as possible to start with, unless or until they're willing or ready to do something more involved. So kind of advisory roles, dipping their toes in the water. We hope that we provide a kind of unintimidating environment for that by being quite research focused and with that social mission focus as well. We hope that looks less threatening than possibly some other sort of more traditional industry routes. We are doing as much work as we can to find funding that social scientists can co-apply for, that being obviously one of the major barriers to people doing anything. There is woefully little of it, particularly for early stage innovation, but we keep looking, and we'll keep trying to recruit people to come and work with us on those where we do find it. And finally, I'll use this bit to get a tiny plug in. I would say get them early. So we are launching a PhD placements program to allow placements to come, students to come and do placements with us with very, very early stage innovators, to kind of wet their innovation whistles and get them excited about it at that early stage in their careers.
Yeah, just while we've got your attention on that, Rachel, that's a really important point you raised, because a lot of these issues we are looking at are pernicious and societal, and there's a lot of people now, you know, venture philanthropy, etc., focusing on this. Why do you think that's not translating into equivalent size of investment or government interventions or others?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I would say one of the big issues with it is because measuring and proving social impact is so difficult. So, you know, demonstrating to investors, whether they're public sector or otherwise, that a thing has tangible impact is much, much harder when the thing you're working on is a social problem than when it's a kind of straightforward economic one, and you can show them in pounds, shillings and pence exactly what their investment is going to leverage. So that is a problem that I know is of interest to many in the social sciences, and should continue to be a focus for all of us if we want to be able to demonstrate the value of what we're doing and leverage that bigger investment in it.
Okay, thanks. Kajal, could I ask you, I think Chris mentioned a good word before, which was the hustle. So just in respect of the area you've been working on, what do you think that we could improve access to for students to be able to bring some of their ideas to fruition, and where can we connect capabilities across universities and Zinc and others to help them with that?
So we refer to hustle as the H word now, because they hear it so much and how important it is. In terms of, it's something actually Chris mentioned around Oxford. We had one company that was from Oxford University, and they said that the culture of entrepreneurship, so promoting the culture of entrepreneurship as a viable path, was such a big part of their decision to solve the problem through a startup venture. So I think we as practitioners can't underestimate that kind of encouragement and that exposure to that path and what that can do. I think the other thing is legal structures and funding. So there are so many more. If you didn't want to make for-profit solely, or you want a different type of structure, there's lots of different options available to you beyond a private limited company. You can do with CIC, different social enterprise structures, but people don't know this. And, you know, linked to that is funding. So they all need funding to get off the ground. So I think it's upon us to learn about the landscape for funding these types of ventures. As Rachel said, she's looking, and, you know, certainly at ASAP, we try to find alternative types of funding that will best fit to those ventures. So that awareness, I would say awareness and exposure for us as practitioners to know that ourselves, but also to make sure that that's articulated while they're at university so that they can solve these problems through startup ventures.
Okay, thanks very much. We're just nearing towards the final part now. Is there anything individually you'd like to say to everybody out there whether they be social science research or involved in some way, shape or form in helping with this. Would you like to leave one of your takeaway messages from this in terms of the inter-community part?
Yeah, sure, happy to kind of jump in on this and just encourage people to get involved. Just, start slowly. It doesn't have to be that you go in the deep end and start your own business. You don't need to know everything. You don't need to know anything. Come and have a go at doing something with one of us or somebody like us. Find out what it's about, get more information, see how it feels, think about some of those alternative options that Kajal's just mentioned, familiarise yourself with the landscape, and then make a decision about what you want to do with it. But don't just, sit on the sidelines worrying that it's not for you.
Okay, thank you. Chris?
Well, obviously I'm going to echo that, but I think where I'd add on to that is, even if you plan on staying in research afterwards, the likelihood is, and a lot of the researchers we work with who go down the entrepreneurial path, even if they don't go the whole way or they get involved in some way, say it's given them a new perspective on their research. They've got new ideas, new hypotheses that they're going to go out and test, and they think it's going to make them a better researcher. So I think actually dipping your toes in the water, if that was all you did, you would still benefit hugely.
Okay, thanks. And Kajal?
Thanks. And apologies, some background noise. Someone's banging on a roof in the background. So I'll try and talk a little bit louder here. But I think my one takeaway here, someone asked me the question, do you really need a social science specific accelerator or social venture accelerator? And my answer to that was yes, because they have a different mindset, they have a different emphasis. And if we don't draw that out, we're not going to create a new paradigm of business. And there needs to be one with the world that we're living in currently. We need to acknowledge the role of social sciences. So, as Rachel mentioned, just really promote the visibility of social science ventures at our collective universities, and provide that more nuanced and tailored support to help those ventures start and scale.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I mean, thanks everyone for attending. And as we said, this is an ongoing development, and the whole of the Aspect Festival is dedicated towards this. So I just think the key takeaway messages are for us to normalise the fragmentation that we see. The challenge is to get everybody to be able to measure and show the improvement they're making, so the funds flow toward them, and the entrepreneurial skills are applicable in all areas, not just in a commercial area. And the key thing to all what we're trying to do is the whole self-effectuation, and it may not be your first, it may not be your second, it probably will be your third venture that may make a difference. But the point is, keep making a difference and keep on making a difference. So thanks everybody for your questions, and thanks everybody for your time. I particularly like to thank our super stagers on the pyramid stage, Chris, Kajal and Rachel, and I'm sure you'll all want to follow up with them at various points to see what fantastic programs they're running and have run. So thanks everybody, and look forward to seeing you all soon, and enjoy the future sessions at the festival. Thank you.